So pumped and excited to be able to return to the sport of snowboarding today here on Off the Podium to chat with a two-time Olympic snowboarder competed in Pyeongchang and Beijing. And so excited to learn a lot more about his career, his achievements, and everything else in between. It's a pleasure to welcome to the show Adam Lambert. Adam, first of all, welcome to Off the Podium. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I haven't done a
It's
podcast before, so it's my first time.
Wow, I will try and be
Yeah.
gentle. That's surprising. I thought you'd be beating these sort of interviews off with a stick. Really, come on, people,
Uh,
get Adam in demand. Why aren't you on? Why isn't you on people's podcasts? Come on.
yeah, that's a bit hit and miss. I think, as snow sports is it's an interesting genre of sport. Especially in Australia, we get, maybe 6 months of coverage every 4 years. But, it's fine. I'm excited to be here, and that's all that really matters.
That's
Keen
you're
to
the
be on the
first,
podcast.
the first one,
Yeah.
Adam, to ever be excited to be here. So thank you. It's only taken a couple of hundred episodes, so we're good. We're off to a good start. But I mean, it's a great point you make. I mean, we always like to talk a lot with our winter athletes, sort of about how realistically, a lot of the time you do only sort of get that brief bit of coverage every 4 years in an Olympic cycle. And obviously at the time of doing this interview, we're 6 months removed from Beijing. So it's sort of, I guess, dies down a little bit now in terms of sort of that attention. But I mean, do you sort of make the most of that then when you can, sort of in the lead up to an Olympics and maybe the little bit of time after an Olympics when people are talking about yourself and your fellow Australian snow athletes?
Yeah, we definitely try to. Like I said, it's a very narrow window, so it's good to get try and get your name out there a little bit. Try and get your name in front of some eyes that don't normally see you. It's hard though. I mean, it's still people just are thinking about it. They still have to kind of find you. So the only thing you can really do is you be consistent on your socials and you try to take any kind of interview opportunities you can take and TV appearances if they come up and just make the most of it when you can and try and get a little bit of a following and get your name out there a little bit. That's what we try to do, but it's not as easy as it sounds. Because sometimes you got to be known to get known. Yeah, but I mean, obviously that's the goal. Every 4 years we have this big spotlight. The Olympics comes around, and all of the attention is on us for a little while, and we try to take advantage of it.
I think it's always the most fascinating stories often come from the winter athletes too, sort of the journeys that it takes for you to get to, the peak stage at the Olympics. And for yourself, I believe you were strapped to a snowboard basically at 18 months of age. So, I mean, this almost seems like it was something you almost born into. I mean, is that the story? Is it that simple? At 18 months, your parents are like, come on, Adam, you're going on a snowboard. This is what you're going to do for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I think I got pretty lucky. My parents were snowboard enthusiasts. I'd even say snowboard fanatics to a certain point. And we used to live up at Nelson Bay area, Newcastle area, and they used to drive down here every week. Sorry, not down here where I am right now, but in Jindabyne, they used to drive to Jindabyne every weekend to Perisher and Thredbo. And then when I came along, they were like, "This is too hard with a kid. Why don't we just move here full time?" So they shipped up, packed their whole life. All of our family lives up north. They came down here by themselves and set up a new life. And part of that life was putting me on a snowboard at 18 months and seeing how I went.
And the rest is history. That's crazy. What
Yeah.
was it? Did you ever sort of have a conversation with them at all about what about snowboarding it was that drew them to it?
I never really did. I think that, I mean, they've always kind of been into water sports. They loved water skiing, wakeboarding. I think it was just a natural extension of that in a way. But yeah, I haven't actually asked them why they enjoyed snowboarding and skiing so much, or even what got them into it. That's a good question. I have to ask them at some point.
It's fascinating to think because sort of when you were younger, what, about a year old when the Nagano Olympics were on in 1998, that's when snowboarding made its debut at the Olympics. So I guess sort of outside of an Olympics, snowboarding wasn't exactly something that was shown too much on that stage unless it was sort of, I guess, in X Games or things along those lines. So it's obviously taken off from strength to strength nowadays, but it's almost like you were kind of born at the right time then for snowboarding, essentially, that within that period, snowboarding had just debuted at the Olympics, so it's kind of a perfect time to grow up in the sport, I guess.
Yeah, it was. And I think that growing up in Australia as well, snowboarding is such a popular sport in Australia. over in Europe, you still see a lot of kids. They're all riding skis. They're all ski racers from a young age. But in Australia, like more than half of the kids are snowboarders. Like, it's just kind of like the cool thing to do, you know. And all the kids want to be cool, and they come in and it's just it's such a nice, such a nice community of snowboarders in Australia. You know, and you get your bad eggs, but you definitely have. I don't know. It's just like it's so loved in Australia, and there's no like a stigma attached to it. In some places overseas, there's still a stigma attached to snowboarding. It's a great place to grow up, and it's a great place to be able to learn how to snowboard. And yeah, it's yeah.
It's that laid back attitude, I can imagine, sort of that connects.
Yeah,
with
it is, and that especially that early 2000s kind of time period. It was just, you know, the baggiest pants you can wear. It was the I don't know. It was like the Grom hype. You know, you have all the little kids kind of cruising around like myself at the time, and all of the adults are like, "Yeah, sick. Look at these little Groms." It was a good time to grow up.
Well, that's the main thing. And was it always snowboarding? Were you purely set on that? Did you try your hand at sort of skiing and other snow sports as well growing up in that area?
Yeah, I did. I skied and snowboarded until I was 11. My parents didn't like babysitting me that much, so they put me in mini mites, the little parish kids program, and they didn't have snowboarding, so I skied for most of my younger adolescence. And then swapped back over to snowboarding full time around 12 years old. Yeah.
And was that sort of something growing up that it was always winter sports? I mean, were you into other sports as well? Just like typical kid growing up where you would just, you know, play anything wherever you could, really?
Yeah. Yeah, I was. I've played all of it. I played soccer. I played rugby union, rugby league. I was a pretty good wakeboarder. Surfed a little bit, water skied as well, skateboarding. I think I said that already, but I did a lot of stuff growing up, and I think that actually has played a large part in why I'm so good at the sport that I do, because it's a really variable sport. It's not like slalom or let's use swimming as an analogy. Swimming is it's a very strict sport. It's one thing, and you do it all day, every day. Watercross is completely different. Every single event we go to, even when we go back to the same venues, it's completely different. So it's very variable. And I think that doing all those different sports growing up was a huge advantage for me.
And did you ever sort of just harbour aspirations to go to an Olympics, or was that something that sort of came the more you progressed in the sport?
Funnily enough, my first ever like Olympic dream was for swimming. I used to swim. I reckon I swam for most of my childhood, like in swim club. And I think I was the regional champion for like 200 meters and 100-meter butterfly. Just like weird, like long distance things that I just happened to be good at. But I had from a young age, I was like, I want to go to the Olympics as a swimmer, but it never really happened. So I suppose snowboarding was an extension of that, but I never really planned on it. It just kind of happened. It happened. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like a lot of snowboarders, they don't really plan on being an Olympic athlete. It just kind of, the pieces fall into place, and we get to, you know, experience that kind of Olympic spirit down the line.
Which I can imagine too, sort of growing up in that period at that young age as well. I mean, you would have been, what, about 13 when Tora Bright won gold in Vancouver? So, I mean, when something like that exposes a sport a little bit more as well, I mean, I can imagine, do you see something like that and that changes your mind a little bit, seeing that is a possibility, like an Olympic gold medal by an Australian in the sport?
Yeah, for sure. I think that, yeah, it's hard to say for sure. It was a long time ago, but yeah, I don't think I ever grew up with aspirations to be an Olympic snowboarder. But as I got older, for sure, it became more of a goal, especially towards when I was 19 years old, 20 years old, when I decided that watercross was going to be a sport that I was going to like push for, something that I wanted to try and make a career. Obviously, then I was all in for the Olympics, but the last few years of my schooling career, the lead up to the end of my schooling career, I was definitely kind of thinking that this is what I want to do.
And are your parents happy? I mean, they've strapped you on a board at 18 months. So, I mean, I can imagine this is something that they might sort of be okay with you at, even though you're at that peak part of your life with the school coming to an end, that you are sort of having a bit of an eye on the snowboarding in a post-schooling career.
Oh, they've always been supportive. I wouldn't be anywhere near where I am without them. Boardercross and snowboarding in general isn't a very cheap sport to get into, especially when you get overseas. And my parents were, they were anal about making sure that they were applying for grants and making sure I was applying for grants to make sure that I could pay my way and have a proper go at it. But at the same time, I think that you get a little bit desensitized to it. Boardercross is a very dangerous sport. And I've been doing a bit of boxing recently as like a training method. And I was talking to my parents the other day. I was like, I think I want to do a boxing match one day. And they were like, my mum was like, no, don't do that. That's dangerous as. And my dad was like, yeah, because the sport he currently plays is ping pong. Like, it's super safe sport he's currently competing in. But yeah, no, they're super supportive, and they love what I do, and I'm sure they love being able to go and visit some of the places I visit as well as spectators from time to time.
What is it about boxing that sort of draws you into maybe having a bit of a crack at that? I mean, is this sort of a late change? Could we see you maybe, 10 years' time, Brisbane, home Olympics, boxing? You never know.
Yeah, I think that unfortunately my weight class would be heavyweight or super heavyweight, and I'm a shorty. So I would get absolutely smoked in a professional boxing match. Thinking more like a charity one.
Right. I could see that. I mean, there's probably plenty of, fellow snowboarders out there. You probably would love to get into a boxing ring. They probably piss you off out there on the course and get them in the ring. There's for charity. Yeah. You could do that.
Yeah, we'll find someone.
Which I believe you sort of focus a bit on slope style for a little bit. I mean, kind of, is it always a case of trying your hand at the different disciplines in snowboarding before you eventually do settle on snowboard cross?
Yeah. Well, I always loved boardercross, don't get me wrong. But when I was growing up, we didn't have the best boardercross program. And my parents were adamant that boardercross was not something that I probably should train full time. And I'm glad that they said that. I still think that that's the case. So for the first, I think I trained slopestyle for 5 years, almost 5 years straight, from when I was like 12 until I was 16, give or take. And yeah, I think that kind of cross training is incredibly important. Like my ability to, do jumps, air awareness, confidence also, even something as simple as confidence on jumps makes a huge difference for our sport. So like having that opportunity to learn how to do slopestyle. And I mean, I got all right. I hurt myself in 2015, I think. I blew my ACL, my first ACL. And had to do rehab. And by the time I got back from that, I was 17 years old. I was a little bit too old to keep pursuing slopestyle. But that was okay for me because I'd actually always planned on pursuing boardercross. Like I always enjoyed boardercross a bit more. So I'm glad that I got the opportunity to train so hard at slopestyle though. I think it's made a massive difference in my boardercross capabilities.
And I can imagine sort of taking that period to, I guess, recover from an injury gives you a lot of time to think and prepare for a switch along those lines. So, I mean, going on what you said, that obviously helped the decision maybe a little bit more, that you had that time to kind of regroup and think a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it did for sure. ACL recovery is a long, slow process, especially at the beginning. So there's a lot of time thinking on the couch.
And was that the same ACL you did sort of later on as well? Like you blew the same one?
Yeah, it was the same one. My left ACL. Snowboarders, this is an unofficial study, but from all the people that I've talked to that are snowboarders that have blown their ACL, it's been almost entirely on their front leg. So front leg ACL injuries in snowboarding are relatively common, at least more than back leg ACL injuries. So I've had 2 now. Planning on not having a third if I can avoid it.
Sounds like a good idea.
It's a pain. That kind of injury is a real pain. The rehab is really long and it hurts afterwards for a while. So you got to get used to knowing what's hurting and what's just like phantom pain. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when
Which I can
something's
imagine
wrong
as an
versus
athlete.
when something's just.
Yeah, I was going to say, imagine as an athlete too, it's that constant fighting of you just want nothing more than to get back out there. But of course, you've probably got a lot of doctors and physios going, no, this is not a good idea. You need to give it more time.
Yeah.
Otherwise, this could get worse. I mean, it's a constant battle,
Yeah.
I can imagine.
It is. And it was a bit of a culture shock for me too, because my first injury, my first ACL injury, I did that, outside of the program on my own. And I had a physio and she was lovely. Her name was Pam. And my doctor, Craig Waller from Sydney, he was pretty confident that I was going to be back on snow within 4 months. My physio said there's no way in hell. And then they met in the middle towards the end of it. They met in the middle. So I was back on snow at about 4.5 months. But then the second time around with all of the, there's a little bit more liability involved once you're on the Australian team. So it's a little bit more rigid. It's a little bit more, it's not as flexible. So it ended up taking me 7 months to get back on snow the second time, just because I had to make sure I was ticking all the boxes, crossing the T's, dotting the I's. Whereas when I was doing it by myself, it was like, yeah, you're probably right. And I was also 16, so that helped. But yeah, it's a little bit different. When you're on the team, you're definitely being watched, and everyone's making sure you're doing everything right, which is a good thing, really.
Is there much fear when it comes to that first time on snow? That, as soon as that you're going to go off that first jump and have that first landing, no matter how much training you've maybe done in a gym or everything like that, I guess it can't compare to that first time racing. And I can imagine what's going in the back of your mind that first time.
Yeah, I think, well, for me, I was really lucky the first time because I was so young. And everyone that was giving me the go ahead was so confident that I was going to be good, that I didn't really, call it, youthful ignorance, but I didn't really have any worries about my snowboarding post injury. And because I'd gone through that already, when I came back the second time, sure, yeah, there's definitely some nervousness about it. But especially like with the slow burn that we did to get into the snowboarding again, I was super confident that my knee was going to be good. And it was. Obviously, the feature that I blew my ACL on the first time, we had to go back and do that again. And I was just a little, you're always a little bit tentative, but I had already known that from the last time I was okay. So I assumed that this time I was going to be okay as well. And it probably helped my mental state a little bit.
I can imagine you understand what's going to go along with that, essentially, kind of the second time around versus...
Yeah, exactly. You know what to expect.
When it came to your switch to border cross, I mean, I loved sort of your breakout year. You're 15 at the year 2015, and you finished 15th at the Junior World Championships. I mean, is 15 now basically your lucky number based on all of the 15s that kind of came together in that year at that age and that placing?
That's funny. That's actually a statistic I didn't know. It might be now. It was number 12, but now it might have to be 15. That year, man, that was in China, I think, that the Junior Worlds in China in Yabuli. And yeah, it was a good experience, that one. I was so sick, so sick there. I got terrible gastro on the night before training day. And I was up at night, going out both ends, and I rocked up to the course. If I got that sick, there's no chance nowadays that I'd turn up. But at 15 years old, it's like, whatever, just have half a banana and go snowboard. So I rock up to the course, just absolutely cooked. Did my training runs. I honestly do not remember a thing like from that day and the next day, because the next day I was still sick and it was quali day. So I did both training and quali day there, absolutely crook as a dog. And then I knocked it on the third night, and I was all good on race day. But man, what a crazy time.
I'm speechless because I'm a wimp when it comes to being sick. That I barely will even get up and go to the fridge to get a bottle of water, let alone compete in a competitive snowboard race. So I mean, that's absolutely insane. Does that give you coaches a little bit of like, oh, okay, this kid's all right, he can push through it all? Or do you think you kind of straight away went, peaked a little bit too much? I'm not actually like that all the time, guys.
I think, I think at that race, I was kind of on my own. I didn't have a team at that point. But so my parents and me and my sister had all gone over to China to do the race. Well, my sister wasn't there. They weren't there to race, obviously. I don't know why I have to talk about that again. Anyway.
It's all right, add them all in. It adds to the story. Why
yeah,
not?
why not? We're all racing. So we all went over for my race because I was only 15 going to China. Obviously, it's a little bit of an unknown. And I don't know. I probably just felt the pressure to like actually do it after we spent all the money to have the whole family go visit China for me to go race. I just didn't want to let anyone down. And the fear of letting people down just drove me to get up out of bed and get on the mountain. I was talking to my dad about it recently, actually, and he said that I looked like a ghost, like barely standing. It was miserable.
Wow.
Miserable.
Gives you a bit of a sense of Chinese food, though. I can imagine when you're in Beijing, maybe you now know what not to eat so you don't possibly get sick again.
Oh, totally. There was a bit of a difference between the food we were getting served there and the food we were getting served at the Olympics. But it's hard to say whether it was the food or not, because I ended up being real careful about what I was eating because I knew that they were putting food out in the bain-marie and they were leaving it there all day until it emptied before they replaced the bain-marie. So I was pretty much just eating bread and jam the whole trip. But I think there was like an actual gastro bug going around.
Wow.
And that's what got a lot of people.
Okay, it wasn't just you. I'm liking this bread and jam, sort of food of Olympic champions, basically.
Yeah.
At that point,
at least at 15, I don't know if I
Yeah.
can function off bread and jam anymore.
Yeah. When you're 15, you always find nutrition in all the weird foods, don't you? It's like,
Exactly.
bread and jam. That'll do me for the next week.
That's fruit and bread.
Yeah, exactly. It's carbs, it's fruit.
Yeah.
It ticks all the boxes, right? So it kind of works. I love sort of the journey that you had then, basically from that point through to your first Olympics in 2018. I mean, you won the Europa Cup, of course, made your World Cup debut basically less than a year out from your first ever Olympics when you was pretty all right as well. So, I mean, that's a very quick transition, isn't it, to go from that point to within less than a year, you're going to be going to an Olympic Games.
It was an incredibly quick turnaround. There was a lot of pressure that year for me because I had kind of this was kind of my like shot. I was going to pull the trigger on this year, or I was going to kind of call it quits. And I spent my life savings to get over to Europe, and we paid for a coach to come with us, and we organized a little team to kind of like spread the cost of accommodation, the coaching fees, the waxing fees, all that stuff. We just set up this little team. I dropped my life savings on flights and accommodation and just sent it. And I just kind of, it kind of just all clicked for me that the start of that year. I hit the Europa Cup tour, won 3 races in a row there. Asked to go race World Cup because I'd met the criteria, and they said, not this year, we'll let you race in February next year. And I was like, okay, fine, is what it is. Rocked up to my first race in Fellberg and managed to pull a 7th place on the second race day. On the first race day, I got 52nd or something, but on the second race day, I got 7th place. And that kind of like, caught the eye of the Australian team. They were like, okay, cool. Yeah, let's go race in La Molina then, the second venue. Pulled up to La Molina and I did one better and I got 6th place. And from that race, my 3rd race ever, they invited me to World Championships. And at World Championships, I got 6th as well. And at that race, it was a 6-man race. So it was a big final that I managed to get into. And from there, it was pretty much locked in. Pyeongchang was pretty much locked in. It was literally just a whirlwind. I went from 3 Europa Cup podiums to an almost guaranteed Olympic debut in a matter of 2 months.
That's insane. And a World Cup
and
podium,
I still wasn't part of the
December.
Australian team.
before. So
Yeah.
you weren't actually part of the Australian team still at that point. How does that
No,
work?
I was on the New South Wales Institute of Sport team, but at that point, the N-Swiss team, the New South Wales Institute of Sport team, has come a long way since I was in that level. Now they've got a coach, they've got funding. They come and they do camps with us. They're actually here right now in this house. There's 14 of us in this house.
Wow, it's like Big
But
Brother.
yeah, kind of. But back then we basically got strength and conditioning coaching, and we had physio access if we needed it while we were in Australia. But that was pretty much like the lot of it. There was not much else going on. So essentially, I was not part of the Australian team, and after I wasn't part of the Australian team even at the end of that year after I got my World Championship 6th place, and then because there's on a year-long contract, so I didn't get the contract till the following June, I think. But yeah, so all of that was done not on the Australian team, and then all of a sudden, 6 months later, I'm on the Australian team on my way to the Olympics.
That's incredible. Is it kind of like, I guess, I don't know if you're familiar too much with how it works to say with the Australian cricket team, but it's sort of like how
Yeah.
you can still be selected to play for Australia without having a Cricket Australia contract. Like there's sort of a middle ground kind of area there.
Yeah, so we're all members of Snow Australia. There's like several different like kind of orbits of authority, but Snow Australia basically is the body that enters all athletes into all the events. So that's from like the lowest level of FIS all the way up to the Olympics, basically. So they have their criteria set out, and the Australian team is separate to that. That's the Olympic Winter Institute of Australia. They're a separate body to Snow Australia. So Snow Australia was like, yep, you can go race at these events. Your results are fine, they're great, whatever. And obviously I was getting help. By the time I went to World Championships, I was basically, shadowing the Australian team. They were helping me. They gave me my first Australia jacket at the time. I got my FIS photo taken and all that stuff. And so, yeah, I was getting entered into the races by Snow Australia, and the Australian team was there, but they weren't with me.
It must be a confidence boosting thing though to go from, where you started to all that kind of success. And as I said, a podium mere months out from Pyeongchang as well. So at the World Cup.
Yeah.
So I mean, how are you feeling at that point, which then ultimately leads to an Olympic selection, about how quickly things have come for you? I mean, it must be a pretty high point to go into your first Olympics having that quick success.
Yeah, it was. And to be honest with you, it was probably almost too quick. I think I got a little bit complacent, a little bit like, wow, this is a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. And I probably took my foot off the gas pedal a little bit too much. And, I mean, it's all a learning curve. But I think I could have done way better at that Olympics had I maybe have had a bit more of a close race to get to the Olympics. I would have still had a little bit of that fight that I had when knew I had to claw my way up through the ranks to get there to begin with. And then I got there and I was like, "Whoa, podium! Wow, this is easy." I was on top of the world. I was so confident. I was overconfident. That's what I was. And you'll see in my results, it kind of shows, because I get this podium and then it drops back down again for an extended period of time, all the way through till the end of the next season. I don't get another top 4 result. So I definitely think that I probably shot myself in the foot a little bit with my attitude, but you have to learn these things.
How is that when it comes to a sport like board cross, which, there is a huge element of luck to it in terms of just a race itself. And I remember we talked to Josie before the Olympics about sort of that consistency, sort of you're building on consistency on how you're performing. So did a lot of that, sort of what you're saying, feed into the fact that you weren't expecting the level of competition maybe at an Olympics, or going back to what we said at the very beginning of the interview, a bit more attention is brought on to you by, say, the media in Australia and things like that? I mean, was that something that kind of all came on to everything, that sort of you'd gotten to that high and then maybe didn't expect all of those elements to go on board with everything as well?
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a shock. Like I once I got all those good results in 2017, 2016, and I came home you know, I've got a little bit of extra. I've gone from absolutely nothing, right? Absolutely no media attention, absolutely no recognition. Well, that's probably a little bit harsh, but um, we'll say it anyway. No recognition from the Australian kind of like orbit of snowboarding to all of a sudden, I'm getting awards at Snow Australia and I'm getting nominations for Junior Athlete of the Year and stuff like this. I'm like, wow, this is all happening so quickly. Um, and and then in February in April that year, we had to do interviews with Channel 7. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be on TV now. I'm only 19 years old and all of this has just happened. So yeah, I think that it probably did play a part of it too. Just like knowing that all of my friends back home are watching on TV. As little as that, I knew that the school where I used to go to school, the principal managed to get New South Wales schools to let our school get off early. Like they had a 2-hour early mark.
Wow.
On the Olympics day to come and watch it at the bowling club. So, I knew all these things were going on. And then, to be fair though, at the Olympics, at Pyeongchang, I got kind of unlucky. Obviously there's things I could have done to avoid it, but I did get taken out by another athlete, which is also something that happens in watercross. But, all of these things, they play a huge part in your mental attitude towards your sport. And I think that I probably let it get a little bit to my head, all the attention. But I'm much more mature now. I'm 25. I'm gearing up for my third Olympics. And I've had a lot of time to reflect on those kinds of decisions I made when I was a bit younger. And I got 4 years now, and I'm going to be 29 by the time I finish my next Olympics. If I want to keep going, I got to make it. I got to make an actual, solid effort. I don't want to regret what I'm doing now in 4 years' time. So, yeah.
I can also imagine, though, that going to an Olympics at that age, it's sort of ticking it off a little bit where you can kind of, other things outside of the competing side of things that come with an Olympic Games, just all those Olympic experiences that I'm sure also are helped by your teammates. I mean, you've got 3 other guys alongside of you who've all been to Olympics before. Obviously, Jared and Cam, and then the late great Chumpy Pullin there as well, kind of helping with that. I mean, were they able to really assist you and kind of help you kind of adapt to an Olympic experience that maybe you're then able to take on board into your next Olympics 4 years later as well?
I think so. I think that they were very supportive they were super supportive of my journey. But the thing was, I didn't have much time to get to know them because, we had our like 3 weeks in Europe the year before where I did the three World Cups and the Europe and the World Championships. Then the next time I saw them was like November the year following almost.
Wow.
So it's not like, we got together a couple times during the year, but I didn't know them that well still. And I was a very shy kid. Especially around that age. I'm a lot less shy now, luckily. But back then I was like, man, these guys are so much better than me. What am I doing here? It was a bit of a crazy thing. And, but at the same time, they definitely, held my hand through my first Olympic experience. And, at the last Olympics, I definitely tried to do my best to hold a few other younger athletes' hands and, yeah, it's such an amazing thing to do. Such an amazing thing to be able to experience. It only happens once every 4 years, so you got to live it up while you're there.
I can imagine though too that despite maybe being a bit disappointed in your own performance, I mean the fact that Jared walks away with a silver, obviously Chumpy made the final as well. So I mean from a team's perspective, It was a pretty successful Olympics. Obviously.
It was an incredible Olympics with 2 men in the big final. Cam got 10th place, and his story is amazing because he fully ruined his elbow. I think I saw the list of injuries. He did like 10 individual like major injuries in his elbow on that fall that he did the run before, and then he still pulled out of the gate in the semi-final, in the small final. And I mean, he got last in that, but he got top 10 overall because he did that. Otherwise, he would have gotten equal 16th. And then Chumpy overshot that middle jump and went down, and Jared, on top of his board all day and managed to sneak out an amazing second place. And that kind of stuff that reflects on the whole team. It luckily we have a relatively large team, so a lot of our funding that comes in, we get to, it's kind of like split amongst the team so that we can go and do things that maybe we wouldn't have been able to do before. And that kind of result at that Olympics, it really set us up for the next 4 years. Unfortunately, we didn't get such good results the last Olympics, but you know, there was a lot. We had a lot going on in the last 4 years. You know, between losing Chumpy, we had the COVID situations. I had ACL reconstructions. Bell had ACL reconstructions. It was definitely a challenging 4 years, but we're hoping that the next 4 years are going to be a lot better.
That was the first Winter Games we had covered on this show. I remember it vividly, and thrilled for Jared. But gosh, all my two other co-hosts, we were just on Team Chumpy. We had Chumpy on a couple of months before the games, and just great interview and just everything about that, and just the career that he had. It was such a great final to see that, and just to see him at least make a final, because that was what his first final at the Olympics he had made, wasn't it, in 3 attempts? So
he had a bit of a shock and run in his first 2 Olympics. I think did he do 2 or 3? I don't remember.
2, I believe, is Vancouver and Sochi when I think that's when he was the world champion, wasn't it?
Yeah, he'd had a bad run in his first 2, and out in the first heat, qualified first in both, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And dropped out in the first heat. Devastating to watch on telly for me, but great to see him. We miss him a lot. We do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's still hard to believe that he's no longer with us, which obviously I can imagine still for you guys is still very very hard to sort of comprehend, because he just seemed like such a presence to all of you, no matter how you were competing, and always seemed such a help. And I can imagine without his influence, I mean, the sport itself, probably wouldn't be in the position it is today.
Yeah, no, he was once in a lifetime kind of bloke, Chump. He, I don't think I ever met somebody that didn't like him. And, I didn't know this, but I knew I knew that he knew a lot of people, but after he passed away, just the overwhelming amount of people that just knew, had known him, it had an effect on their life. It was crazy. And, I think that pretty much the entire snowboard cross industry in Australia has, a debt to pay to him that they probably will never be able to, because he's the one that pushed the sport in Australia, and he's the one that made young kids like me want to do it. And I was lucky that he ended up, I managed to be all 3 stages of a Chumpy fan. I was he was my idol when I was growing up. He was my coach at some of the futures programs that we do, where the young kids get to meet the older athletes. Then he was my teammate, and then he was my friend, and I feel really lucky to have been able to know him so well and hang out with him. Got so many stories to tell that I probably won't tell. Might drag his name a little bit. Really good stories though, some
there's a book in there.
Nights out on tour that
there's a tribute Chumpy book I think you guys need to
write. But just so lovely, and so welcoming too. A little nervous kid, little shy kid joins the team, and he's all about it. And awesome bloke.
Such a great man, and such a legend of the sport for sure. I always love hearing about sort of Olympic experiences in terms of just soaking up things like village life, whether you got to do opening or closing ceremonies. Did you get to do a lot of that in Pyeongchang? Was it more of a case of you did more of that in Beijing? Kind of how did the both Olympics kind of come with those sort of experiences?
I think that both of my Olympic experience might actually be fairly different to most people's, because Australia usually, in Pyeongchang at least, Australia held a Australian welcome party, but the border cross team's flight was delayed by 5 or 6 hours, so we ended up missing the welcome party, which whatever, it's not that big of a deal. Got to go to the opening ceremony. That was awesome. Absolutely unbelievable vibe in that room. And then we got moved from the main village out to the sub village that the Australian team had set up, because the venue was an hour away from the village. So we had a little hotel that we'd kind of set up as a base of operations for our sport. And so we were separated from most of the village for the majority of the time I was there. And then when I came back, obviously the village life is amazing. It's so fun. It's so awesome. You know, you have your little pins. I'm sure you've heard about the pins.
Oh,
You get
yeah.
your pins, and it's a whole like mini game. You trading all your pins with different nations. See if you can get the rarest pin. And that's an amazing experience in itself. And then you've got all of the, you know, if you end up making friends with people from other nations, you've got all of their like team houses that you can go into and kind of like feel a little bit of like wherever they're from. Like, I think I went to the Austrian house. It felt like we were in like a, you know, a Stein bar out at bloody, I don't know. You know what I mean? It's just, I felt like we were in Austria, at a bar in Austria. And same with the German house, the Czech house. Yeah, it's awesome experience. Beijing was definitely a little bit more tame because obviously with COVID and everyone being so paranoid, rightly so, of catching COVID and missing out on their events. We kept everything really insular. We had the Australian house at the Olympic Village. We had a chef. We had all in-house food. We imported everything. So we didn't have to share anything.
Barista too, which I've learned.
We had a barista. Yeah.
Were you the only country that had a barista? I think I've learned from some of the other Aussie athletes.
Yep. No, we were. I think he worked. I'm not gonna quote too much here because I don't remember it that well. But he was the barista that worked at one of the offices for the AIS, I think, and he was brought on board.
Not a bad gig.
Incredible.
So the AIS, the AOC knocks on your door before the, hey, would you like to come to Beijing and serve some coffee for our athletes? Sure, all right.
Hell yeah. And so I think he got to go to the opening ceremony too. Awesome experience for him. Because I'll get to this in a second, but so our village, everything was in-house. Like we didn't do anything basically outside. Towards the end, we got to see a couple of our friends from other nations. We hang out in the common room, but other than that, all in house. And the same thing, kind of with the opening ceremony. It was only a very small amount of people that were able to go from our village because the time periods that you were allowed to arrive, and then the time periods between when you arrived and when you had to leave were so narrow that basically it boiled down to like the border cross team. I think some of the park and pipe team were able to come as well for snowboarding, not for skiing though, because other guys had to compete the next day, and it was like a 4-hour drive plus however long it takes to do the opening ceremony and then all the way back again to the village. So it was just a very small contingent of athletes that got to go, and also a few staff, including the barista.
Wow. Which is always, I love it when you do kind of see that the staff get involved because, you know, they're there for that experience. So, I mean, there were literally some countries, I think, that maybe send one athlete and they're competing the next day. So, you know, you've got the team physio is carrying the flag for Nigeria or something like that. And it's just, it's fascinating how that kind of works. But, I mean, I guess in that aspect, given that Beijing was so unique, given that you got to experience it in Pyeongchang, I mean, you've experienced two very different Olympics, haven't you? That maybe some people who debuted in Beijing obviously probably don't really know any different. We learned that from a lot of our Tokyo athletes last year as well. They don't know any different.
Totally. And the crazy thing is, I think that the next one, Milano Cortina, is going to be completely different again.
Yeah.
You know, I've read that Milano Cortina is going to be the most geographically spread out Olympics that's ever been done, like over 600 kilometers, I think. So I'm sure that Olympics is going to be completely different again. We'll just have to play it by ear, mate. You know, you don't expect too much. Every time you go to an Olympics, it doesn't matter how many times you've been there. I've been there twice now. Both were very, very different. So I'm expecting this one to be different as well.
And then 2030, your next one, your 2034, as you keep going, they would just keep on.
I'll be pretty old by 2034. Holy hell.
Still young, 37,
I'll be
right?
37.
That's not too bad.
Yeah, it's pretty old for a border cross racer. There's only one guy that's that old.
Was that Mr. Baumgartner, Nick? Was it?
Yeah, the most
Which, I mean, he
recent
got a gold when he's
medalist.
in his 40s. Come
He
on,
did,
like
he
I mean,
did. Yeah,
plenty of time for you there, Adam. You
heaps
know,
of time.
spring chicken. You're not even close to getting to where he's at. Yeah, I mean, obviously talking about sort of what happened in Pyeongchang. I mean, how was that mindset then going in to Beijing? Obviously, another podium. You'd gotten fourth just beforehand as well, and so I mean, was the confidence where it was at, but a different level of confidence where it was going into Pyeongchang?
Yeah, it was. It was. I mean, I was obviously coming off a few good results. Then I'd gotten fifth place at the test event. I was riding really well at the test event in Beijing. So we went to Beijing to do a test, basically a test run for the Olympics, but it was a World Cup. I got fifth place there, and then we turned around in Russia. I'd qualified second, and then I'd finished fourth. So I was feeling really fast on those types of courses. They were very similar courses. And, you know, sometimes it comes down to small mistakes. And in the qualification, I made a mistake which put me into the second bracket of riders, so the 16 to 32. And I should have really been in the top 16 because my second run on a slower course ended up being sixth fastest of the day. So I really should have been not against the guys I was racing against. And I ended up getting put up against the two guys that I would consider like probably my closest rivals, like in a friendly way. Because they're the
guys
youngest.
you in the boxing ring potentially in the future?
Maybe. I reckon I could take them.
You can take Elliot. Come on.
Yeah, Elliot, exactly. So us three, we're all the same age roughly. Elliot's a bit younger. Merlin's a little bit younger than I am, but we all basically started World Cup at the same time. And we've been progressing together. So I was there and I was like, man, this is a tough heat between the boys. And it came down to centimeters in the end.
0.3 seconds, was it not?
Yeah.
Basically at the end.
0.03, I think.
0.03, yeah.
Yeah.
Which you can't even measure that. You can't even measure that without a special clock.
It's about that far, going at about 60 to 70 kilometers an hour. But you know, I'm much more comfortable with that result, surprisingly enough. Because in Pyeongchang I got taken out, which was really hard to swallow. But at least I know that in Beijing it was my own fault. I made mistakes in qualification that could have changed the outcome of the race completely. I made mistakes in the heat that could have changed the end result of that heat. So I'm much more comfortable with that result overall. Even though it's still disappointing, I was much more ready to accept it and move on and start the next 4-year cycle with a clear mind. You know, we've got a bit of a different vibe going this year with the training. The training's been so much more intense, and we're really pushing to be the best we can be for this World Cup season. You know, when everyone's taking their foot off the gas after the Olympics, we're trying to put our foot on it and really push. I'd say I'm the fittest right now than I've been in a long time, like a long time, or maybe ever. And it's very exciting. It's very exciting.
I love the quote that you said after that race, where you said, everything went to plan until the last turn. It feels great to be here. It feels terrible to lose. That's border cross. We love it. I mean, you've got negatives and positives all in one sentence there, basically. But I mean, it's just such a great summary of the sport, I think, in that sentence. Yeah,
it's an emotional roller coaster. You know, the highs are high, the lows are low. But yeah, that's what we do. We do love it. That's all there is to it.
Which, when you look at sort of what happened then, I mean, you know, Merlin obviously won the small final and Elliot got silver. So, I mean, kind of, it's just that sport of margins that had that been you instead of one of them, who knows what could have happened.
Totally. And you can sit there and think about the what ifs a lot, and you do a little bit, you know, it's inevitable, but we try not to think about the what ifs because they hold you back. You know, you got to let them go. You got to let them go, and you got to think about the next big thing, the next big race, the next small goal on the ladder to the big goal.
Which it makes you hungrier, I guess, too, though, doesn't it? You kind of, as you're talking about, like you can leave the Olympics with a bit of a, you know, head held a little bit higher rather than being taken out to spur you on, so that when you go towards Milan, it's maybe a different mindset at all, knowing that that's what you're capable of. Let's take the next step.
Yeah, totally. It totally does. And I think it just matures you a little bit, you know, every time you take a big hit, you know, you think about it, you reflect on it, you mature a little bit, and you take what you've learned and you go towards the next race. So yeah.
You obviously got a bit of a second chance though with the mixed team. Australia sort of getting a second team last minute, which I worked at Channel 7 during the Olympics. I was a researcher, and we were sort of trying to work out how it all would work out, because obviously Jared and Bell were the world champions going into that, but Jared obviously didn't have a very good meet. So when it came to the selection, so Cam and Bell get chosen as Australia 1 essentially. You and Josie then Australia 2. Does that all come down to how you guys performed in the individual events as to why, say, you got the nod over Jared, given that he was a world champion? It didn't matter because you did better in the Olympics?
Yeah, so the criteria was based on individual results from the year, that year. So
right.
The way it worked, there was a committee. I think the committee was an 8-person committee, and the selection committee, you know, it included the chef de mission, the CEO of NSWIS, the CEO of Snow Australia, the CEO of OWIA, the lead support of OWIA, and a few, and the coaches obviously, and I think some other people that work more closely with Jared were involved in the decision-making process as well. And so basically the end result was based off best result at the Olympics. Obviously Cam got that best result. He got the A team spot. That was also based off his World Cup podium that year and a few other top 8 results that he'd had. And I was picked in second place based off my top 5, 5th place at the 5th place at the test event, my 4th place in Russia, and my other sprinkling of top 16 results. It was just based off the year that year. Who was on form.
And how is that then when you get that tap on the shoulder? When Australia get given a second team, and then here you are, you sort of get another chance. I mean, we'll obviously talk about the fact that, unfortunately, both Australian teams got drawn in the same heat. But, I mean, must be a nice little moment to go, cool, I get another chance at this. Yeah,
we kind of mentally prepared for the eventuality. And the reason we did is because we knew that there were the way that the Olympics worked it. They brought in some other. So the qualification for the Olympics is top 32, basically. Top 32 athletes, give or take, get to go to the Olympics. Obviously, there's a few nations with a few more than 4 people in the top 32, so that goes down to 33rd, 34th, etc. But generally, it's the top 32. For this Olympics, because of the team event, what they did was they invited a few people who were way outside of the top 32 to race so that they could fill spots for nations for the team event. And that was a very controversial decision at the time. More in-house, obviously, but we were fairly certain that there were a few of the female races that were in over their head, so to speak. I know the Japanese team who didn't end up racing, the Japanese girl had only ever done 1 World Cup before, never competed at a bigger event than that. And the Czech team, this one was a little bit more on the nose, a little bit more like guesswork. He broke his wrist during training. So we were mentally prepared to keep racing because there was only 1 Czech boy, there was only 1 Japanese girl, and in the end, they both ended up hurting themselves and not being able to race. So we never really switched off. But the hardest part was because we didn't find out for sure until the day before the race. We had women's race, men's race, day off. That's the afternoon of the day off. We found out who was going to be racing. We didn't know up until that night. And then obviously team event the day after.
Wow. So such a quick turnaround. And is there much in terms of, you know, when you teamed up with Josie, I mean, is there like a strategy meeting? Like, do you have to sort of come there? I mean, given that you're drawn in the same heat as Cam and Bell, do you guys have to come up with some sort of tag? Yeah. I mean, how does that then work?
Well, yeah, it's a tough one. We're a close-knit team, and obviously, it's a big event. And if it was just 2 individuals racing together in the same heat, it is what it is. Your strategy meeting's in your head. You don't talk to anyone. But for this event, we did actually have to. We all 4 of us, we were sat together. We were like, all right, let's break, let's go do our strat meeting on our own, and then we'll come back and hang out. We can't do it together. So the strat meeting wasn't very long, really. It basically boiled down to race your best race. A few bits and bobs here, like basically the same things we talked about in the individual race. We weren't talking too much strat like as a team because there's not that much to talk about. Basically, there's a men's race and then there's a women's race, but the women's race is broken up with the men's times. So, whatever strategies you had in the individual race, they were completely still they still worked for the team event. It's just that the whole layout's a little bit different. And I was very proud of how Josie performed at that race. She really outdid herself, especially in that start section. She got so much speed, and I just think she surprised herself. And she caught up to Lindsay a little bit faster than she expected, and she just clipped her board and went down. But it was a great experience. And you probably didn't know this, but me and Josie were actually neighbors growing up. So
oh wow,
across the road neighbors. So to be able to race with somebody that I knew so well from such a young age was a really cool experience.
It's crazy. You grew up as neighbors and you end up as teammates, literally in an event at Olympic Games. That's insane.
Yeah, yep.
Wow.
It was pretty nuts.
Which, I mean, obviously disappointing how it all turned out to Australians in one heat, and unfortunately both go down. But I've got to say, if Australia wasn't going to win the gold, I think most people might have secretly been cheering on for Lindsay and Nick, particularly Lindsay's story after Turin. I mean, it was to go from that to 2 Olympic gold medals, not bad. And for Nick, as we mentioned before, at his age, to kind of go away with that, I mean, it was a great story.
No, Lindsay's got an epic redemption arc, is what we've called it. From her first Olympics. She had the guts
to do the grab at the end too, didn't she, in the team final? Like, she had the guts.
Did she? I didn't see that.
She did. I remember I think we were doing that live in an episode, and we go, holy, she's doing it. Like, wow, Lindsay, you're risking fate again.
Yeah, you don't live that one down if you screw it up twice, that's for sure. But she had a redemption arc. She's, I don't know for sure, I think she's the most decorated woman of all time in border cross. Multiple times world champion, multiple times World Cup podium athlete. So she's by no means a pushover, and obviously she would have won a gold medal in Canada had she not fallen where she did. And I'm super happy for her, and she's a lovely lady. Like, we're friends. The Australian team is in a very unique and lucky position where we're good friends with most of the teams on tour. And, it was great to see, her do so well after we got out, of course. Great to see those two do so well, because they're probably the oldest. That was probably the oldest aggregate team on tour by a long way. With Lindsay, Lindsay's in her 30s. Yeah.
Get older.
Exactly. I'm still coming into my prime, mate, I reckon.
Yeah. And Josie's a spring chicken still too. She's only 18, isn't she? So, like, I mean, plenty of years up your sleeve.
Well, she's done 2 seasons. I've done 5 seasons. There's plenty more seasons left in us.
Yeah, exactly. I can imagine that. We're going to close it out with a set of sort of get to know yourself, fun, silly questions in just a moment. Just a couple of things, though. I always love finding out in certain sports about sledging, rivalries. I mean, you're talking about boxing, getting these guys in the ring, but I mean, it's a bit of a physical sport. There's a bit of, contact going on out there and that, but I mean, are there just some sort of athletes or some countries where the chirping gets on a little bit more, and sometimes you're like, I love beating these guys out, and like the Czechs, God, I love beating the Czechs, or the Dutch, they're so good to beat, like, out there on the course.
It's a tough one because we are really good friends with everyone, and I'm pretty okay with getting beaten by a lot of people. There are some teams that have some like tactics that we don't agree with. Without throwing names out there, the Italians tend to ride lines on the turns that cause accidents sometimes. Cam is a big anti-fan of that. He's been taken out by a few of the Italians in the exact same way over the course of a few years. So if we pull an Italian, you got to plan around that. That they're always going to do the same thing. They're always going to dive on the inside of the turn, and then they're going to run it super wide and push you up into the fence and stuff like that. So it feels good to get through a heat where they can't do that to you, for sure. But I mean, other than that, everyone's out there having a good time. Everyone's loving the sport. So I don't really feel good about beating anyone in particular. I just feel good to not get beaten.
I think that will feel a little bit better though in 4 years' time being Italian in Italy though. Like, I mean,
Oh,
if they're gonna bring
totally.
those
Yeah, that'll
tactics to the table.
the home, the home crowd won't be so happy, but that's all right. I'll buy him a beer afterwards.
Exactly. Well, that's all the main thing. And before we get to it, do you, since 2009, how much attention extra does Adam Lambert? You're talking about the name recognition. I can imagine almost your name probably get better attention out there after American Idol 2009. Like, doesn't that help you a little bit sometimes? You can just play off that you're a certain other guy out there.
Yeah, well, so a lot of people ask when they see my name or ask for my name. They're like, "Oh, what's your, this is general public in usually stuff." But you know, I'll be talking to someone and I'll be like, "Oh, what's your name?" Because I'll say, "Oh, I'm snowboarder, blah blah blah." What's your name? I'm like, "Oh, it's Adam." They're like, "Can your last name Lambert?" They're like, "Oh, like the singer," and I'm like, "Yeah, like the singer, like the singer." And I was like, oh, "I'll have to look you up later," and then I'll be like, just be careful when you look me up, because if you don't add snowboarding on the end, you will not find me. So,
well, I will admit that was a bit of a, like, doing some research on this. It comes a little bit that way. But there was a movie that was recently released. It was a guy did a movie about people in real life called James Bond, and about sort of how they were able to live with such a famous name. So I think there's a sequel there where people can just do people with other famous names. Like, there is another Ben Waterworth out there who is more famous, more successful than I am. So I get his abuse. Like, he's a journalist like me, but a more successful one. He gets like abusive emails that get sent to me. So it's kind of flattering in a way, but at the same time, but like, you could use that for sponsorship, surely. Like, oh, Adam Lambert's snowboarding now. Like, wow, he's doing a lot in life.
Just got to ignore the ignore the blatant like misinformation that's involved with that.
Yes,
but yeah,
you're not part of Queen.
People,
you weren't in Bohemian Rhapsody.
No, totally. But I think it does make me a bit more memorable. If I'm introducing myself to other people that I don't know, people that are interested in the sport, and I tell them my name, they're going to remember it. I'll tell you that much. They're going to remember it. But I usually go by Lambo.
That works. Fun fact, I have interviewed the other Adam Lambert. So he came to Hobart 1 year and I interviewed him in person. So you're the second Adam Lambert I've interviewed.
He mentioned me in a Twitter comment, I think. One time. I got a few followers off that one.
There you go. Wow. I think you should like contact his management, get up on stage or something like that. I don't know, like just surprise people or something like that. Just
I think
get him in on snowboard.
A bit too far. Yeah, give him a snowboard. Yeah, a little gift.
Yeah, that'll work. Yeah. Adam, as I said, we like to wrap up our interviews with a set of fun, get to know you style questions. As always, these are based off a questionnaire that Team Canada gave their athletes ahead of the Pyeongchang and Rio Olympics. And we're going. I always like to base it off an athlete in the same sport. And we're going here on Chris Robinaski. Is he a Canadian you know very well?
Yep.
Or
I know Robo.
All right. Well, we'll see some of his answers here. We can compare them with you to see potentially how they go. There is a draw. Like, you don't have to. It's an optional element if you want to draw. If you're good at drawing, there's little drawings you can do. Draw a picture of yourself. If you're an animal, you can draw.
I don't have any pen or paper.
Don't have any of that. All right. No, that's all good. It can be homework if you want to do it down the line, but not compulsory. First question for you: your favorite Olympic moment is?
It's always been Stephen Bradbury winning his gold medal. That's
perfect answer.
Classic. Yeah.
Which have you ever met the man? Like, I mean, obviously, with the winter sports community. I don't know if you would have bumped shoulders with him at all.
I'm pretty sure I have. Yep. I think he was in Jinbine a few years ago, and he came into the gym and introduced himself. Yeah.
Try his beer. If you haven't tried his beer, it's not bad. Last man
give
standing
it a go.
beer.
I will.
Yeah. Give it a crack.
That's a great name.
It fits very well. It's actually cool merchandise. It's got like turtles and everything on it. He was on the show a couple of months ago. I had to plug it for about half that interview, so it's rubbing off anyway. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Oh, that's a tough one. Probably teleportation. Yeah, I hate planes, so
makes
being
it easy
able to teleport from
going through those places. What's your favorite sports movie?
Sports movie. There's The first one that jumped into my head was Cool Runnings, but I'm sure there's probably other ones I like more, but we'll go with Cool Runnings.
I always like to compare when James Bond has done a cool winter sports. He snowboarded in A View to a Kill. So, I mean, you can technically say you're sort of James Bond. It's just, does a lot more winter than summer
Obviously,
sports.
there's also snowboard movies that I enjoy, but do they count as sports movies?
Of course, like you sort of have to watch them, right?
Oh, yeah. I grew up with them, mate. Anyway.
Your funniest childhood memory is?
Funniest childhood memory? Oh, put me on the spot with the memories, I'll tell you. It's not that good. I don't know. I remember one time I went camping with my parents and I was eating earthworms. They didn't like that, but I didn't care. Probably helped my immune system.
Yeah, why not? Maybe that's where you got sick. That wasn't in China, was it?
No, that wasn't in China.
So we got to the bottom of that after all these years.
I thought that would have helped me with some of the food over there, but it didn't.
Maybe it settles the stomach. Bit of nutritional value there. What's your favourite pump-up song? Please say an Adam Lambert song. That would just be hilarious.
It's not an Adam Lambert song. It's Run to the Hills by Iron Maiden.
Nice. Oh, yes. Good song. All right. Do you put that on sort of before you're in the start gate? Is that sort of a help warm-up?
No, I listen to music on the train on the way to the race. Yep.
Right.
I don't really listen to music once I'm there, but I have a playlist that I listen to on my way there, and that's always the one I like to finish up on.
Good choice. I like it. What's the most recent TV show you binge watched?
I just finished Obi-Wan.
What did you think of it?
I thought it was pretty good overall. I was watching it whilst doing hour-long bike sessions, so it was a really good way to pass the time.
Yes, exactly. Ewan McGregor doesn't age, right? Like the guy just...
Oh, no. And the classic "Hello There" line, it'll never get old either.
I was a little too excited for Hayden Christensen's return. I'm a massive prequel fan. I mean, you can probably tell if I move my head. There's a Revenge of the Sith poster behind me. So, bit of a prequel lover. What is your least favourite food?
Least favourite food? A few years ago, I probably would have said capsicum. Not a huge fan of capsicum overall. And you know what? I probably stick with that. I can't think of anything that's worse off the top of my head.
Okay. I'm glad that as an Australian, I understand that. When last time somebody answered that, my co-host, Colin, didn't understand that. And because, of course, they call it peppers over there. So he's like,
peppers, capsicum?
It's like, come on, Colin.
Yep, peppers and aubergines, mate.
Yeah. If you weren't an athlete, what would you be?
Well, I don't know. Probably, or I don't know. I'm getting into computer programming now, so maybe I would have been a software engineer or a web developer or something. Or maybe I would have just, because my parents own a ski shop in Jindabyne. I currently run the hire shop. I probably would have done that more. Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
Yep.
Do people recognize you in the shop? Like, do they come?
Well,
and go,
sometimes I wear my Australian gear to work because it's the only thing I don't have left that's clean. And then they ask, they're like, "Oh, did you go to the Olympics?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I did," but I don't really make it super fun. It's a very one-sided. Yeah.
That kind of works. I guess in that area though, like, I mean, you probably got a lot of Olympians who are training there anyway, so it's probably
there are a few around, for sure. This year especially.
More common to bump into them than say just down the shops somewhere in Sydney or something like that.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Yeah. Growing up, who was your favourite sports team?
The Raiders, NRL.
Okay. Yep. Still a fan? Still follow it?
Yeah, still watch them a little bit. I usually only watch them if they're in the finals though.
Which, it's kind
they
of
will not
Sharks
be this
man.
year.
So, I paid attention a little bit this year because we did all right. But, it's been a couple of years. So, generally, that's how it works. Where is your favourite vacation spot?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think if I was going to plan myself a holiday and I didn't have to worry about budget, not that that's that important, but if I could plan myself a holiday next week, I would go probably to Japan to go ride powder. I went there once when I was really young, and it's just somewhere I've always wanted to go back to. I love the culture over there. I love the snow is amazing. I love the people are amazing. The food is amazing. It's a place I'm going to go back to one day. I just haven't been able to find the time. It probably won't be until I retire.
Or 2030, possibility that Sapporo could be hosting the
Oh, if
Olympics.
it's in Sapporo, true.
Yeah,
Maybe I'll have to
something.
readjust my goals.
Exactly.
2030
Your
is still
8-year
within
plan.
my range.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's 8 years. Easy.
8 years
Again,
is within reach. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, easily. What's something that people usually describe you as?
Oh, what do people describe me as? Been called Nugget before because I'm kind of short and dense.
I was going to say like golden and tasty, but I
Yeah,
mean,
no, they called me Golden Nugget once too. That was in a article that I read. I got in touch with the lady and I said, please don't call me that again. Um,
didn't go on the Tinder
but
profile after that.
nah, the Golden Nugget. Oh God, I don't know. I think people would describe me as a relatively funny guy overall, friendly. Yeah, that's
Okay,
that's what I'd say to most people.
Chris has said here that he is mother hen of Team Canada. I don't know if you know.
He would have been
much.
back then.
Yeah.
Yeah. That
Okay.
mantle's been passed on to Kevin Hill, who's just retired. So I don't know who the next one's going to be. It's probably going to be Evan Bishop.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We'll do some research. We'll find out.
Yeah,
Last
we'll
question
figure it
for
out.
you. If
Yeah.
you could be an Olympian in any other sport besides your own, Adam, what sport would it be?
Oh, in the past, I probably always would have said BMX. It's such a similar sport overall. And I will give it a crack one day. But nowadays, if I could be Olympic level at any sport, it'd probably have to be surfing.
Nice.
Because I just love the idea of summer at the moment. I haven't had a summer in 8 years. I would love to have a summer. I would love to go surfing all the time. I'd love to make heaps of money. all of that stuff.
Well,
So yeah, BMX or surfing. We'll say both.
just always putting it out there. 10 years time, Brisbane Olympics. You could put in the efforts, you could put in the miles, and then you could be at a home
Mate, I
Olympics
have
and retire.
some serious miles to cover, I reckon, before I'm a good
That's
surfer.
a decade. You got into the Olympics in
it's a
snowboarding
decade. That's
after less than 12 months. Come on, I've got every
It is a
faith that you
decade.
can do it in surfing too.
Well, keep an eye on that space then.
Yeah, I will. We'll watch it very closely there. Adam, before we let you go, if anybody wants to keep up to date with what you've got going on, social media,
Yeah.
website, where can people stay up to date with you?
Yeah, well, my Instagram account actually just got banned, but I've got a new one now. It's Lambo_SBX.
Okay,
So that one's on the up and up. It's growing. I've got like 120 followers now. Very good.
good.
Um,
How do you
also
get
have a
banned? How do you
YouTube-
get banned on
it
Instagram?
got hacked. It got hacked by someone or something, and it sent a message to all my followers, like spam messages,
Right.
and Instagram banned me for using bots. So I tried to appeal it. They didn't get back to me. So just bit the
Wow.
bullet, starting a new one. I also have a YouTube account, YouTube channel, which I'm going to be using more this year. I think last year I let it go by the wayside because I was focused on the Olympics. But now that I've got a bit more time, I'll be uploading videos to there. Hopefully, once a fortnight or so. That's
Fantastic.
Lambo Presents SBX. I think Lambo
Perfect.
Presents SBX. Yeah, that's my YouTube. So
Great.
yeah,
Well,
they're the two main ones.
we'll check them out, and I'm sure people will be following you out there ever so closely towards Milan and Sapporo and Brisbane and everything else that follows in the years. Adam, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today and give you your very first podcast experience. I hope it has
was
been
fun.
memorable and leads you to better ones than this rubbish. It's all good. You're the only way up from here from podcasts, don't worry.
It's Joe Rogan's next, I think.
Yeah,
He's already called me.
He's ready to go. He wants Adam Lambert on the show ASAP. Trust me, and you're the Adam Lambert he wants.
Yeah.